Iris photography is increasingly popular, but it's not just a neat trick or a photography fad, it's a repeatable system that you can easily turn into a profitable business. If you just want to photograph a single iris just for fun, then there's lots of different methods that you could approach this from. However, if you want the best possible results and a true representation of the customer's iris, then there really is only one method that you need to be using. I'm Ben from Adaptalux, and I'm going to walk you through professional iris photography step by step. A few years ago now, we released a video breaking down iris photography in full. The setup, the lighting, the production method, and the post-production workflow. And that video went on to become one of the most watched and referenced iris photography tutorials online, and it laid the foundation for many of the high street iris photography studios that you see today. This video is an update to the last one because we have new methods and new equipment that we'd like to talk about. Our goal, as it was last time, is to capture a beautiful iris portrait. The part of your eye that is coloured is the iris, and that's the part that we're interested in. However, this requires a few things. The pupil needs to be consistently contracted, you also need to deal with the reflections of whatever light source you're using, and of course we need to make the most of our resolution in our camera so that they're big enough to print. Every decision I've made in this setup, from the lens choice to the lighting, is designed to solve those problems without using AI to remove those reflections, which is an option, but it will leave large parts of your final image being AI generated and not representative of the iris you're trying to photograph. So, for the purposes of demonstration, I've set up my own iris photography booth, complete with camera and lens, lighting, headrest, and surround. All of this goes together to create those beautiful iris portraits that we're so fond of. I'm going to walk you through what each of these elements is for and how it works, but first of all we need to talk about stability. That's both stability of the subject and stability of the camera. The closer you get at macro scale, the less margin for error you're going to have. Even small movements of the subject or the camera are going to ruin your focus and the framing of your iris photo. So a professional chin and headrest is ideal. This is going to remove any front to back or side to side movement of the subject, and if you're trying to do this professionally, it's absolutely essential for consistency and just practicality purposes. Around the headstand, we use a simple shroud or surround. This eliminates unwanted reflections from ambient light like that from our skylight here, or perhaps this little red light or any other lights that you have in your studio. It also adds a sense of privacy for the subject. People relax more, they'll blink less, they'll follow instructions a little bit better when they're visually isolated from the rest of the room. Now, it really doesn't matter what this thing looks like as long as it shrouds the customer's head and eyes from outside distractions and light sources. Let's talk about the stabilization of the camera, lens, and lighting rig. First of all, unlike our previous tutorial, it is now possible to handhold this entire rig and simply stabilize yourself on a surface using your elbows, and if you have an autofocus lens with some image stabilization and of course the xenon flash lighting arms, which we'll talk a bit about in just a moment, then you can absolutely photograph an iris handheld like this with perfectly good results. There is still a very good argument to be made for having some sort of stabilization in the form of a tripod or stand, particularly if you're already pairing it with a surround and a headstand anyway. You might as well mount your camera and your lighting nice and steady on the opposite side of the customer. This is the setup that I've found that works best for my particular situation, and that is the Manfrotto One tripod, which is a really nice heavy-duty tripod here with collapsible legs, and most importantly this perpendicular mount just here and a 3-way head on the other end. So this is a really nice solution for sort of floating your camera in the middle of the iris booth, right where it needs to be. However, there are lots and lots of other options, including concertina lifts and perhaps just a mini tripod. Let's talk quickly about camera and lens choices. The camera body that you choose is not too critical. You can use any relatively modern mirrorless or DSLR camera that has interchangeable lenses and brightness control settings. That's pretty much all consumer level cameras these days. We're using the Sony a7 III in this case, and we're using on the front there the brand new Sony 100mm f2.8 macro lens with a 2x teleconverter. The lens choice is very critical. The lens is going to be what decides your magnification, and you want a maximum magnification to minimize cropping and losing resolution later. This lens with the teleconverter provides enough magnification at a comfortable working distance, which means there's enough space between the lens and the subject's eye to place lighting precisely without crowding them. Working distance is absolutely crucial. It affects the comfort of the customer and, most importantly, how effectively we can position our lighting in the space between the end of the lens and the person's eye. Ideally, you're looking for a lens with magnification enough to fill the frame with the iris, but not too close that it gets cut off or the working distance of the lens becomes impractical. Down in the description is linked a companion blog post which will have all of the equipment that we're using today listed for you guys to go and browse. That's everything from the lens to the camera to the tripod and, of course, the lighting, which is the next thing that we need to talk about, and it's absolutely crucial to the way that this method works. For your lighting, you're going to need one of these, a flexible lighting setup that supports both LED and xenon flash. This is important for the update that we're bringing to this method. So we have both continuous lights just here and then also xenon flash lights just here. That's a set of 2 of each, one on either side of the lens. It's absolutely important that these lights are as small as possible. The smaller the better. It's also really important to have full placement control over these lights. They need to be right in front of the lens just here, so having flexible light options like this that you can move around and place exactly within your working distance is absolutely perfect. Lastly, it's really important that you're using proper photography grade lights with a high color rendering index, or CRI. If you want to properly show the colors of the iris, then you need proper lighting. This setup uses 2 xenon flash lighting arms, one to the left of the lens and one to the right. We also have 2 LED lighting arms, one to the left of the lens and one to the right. That's because this entire method is built around controlling reflections, which are the #1 enemy of iris photos. Because of the curved shape of the eye, there will always be reflections of any light sources in the area, including your photography lights. To combat this, we're going to take 2 photographs of every iris and combine them to remove those reflections. There's a link to this exact lighting setup in the description, along with the cheaper but still effective setup that we used in the previous tutorial that only used the 2 continuous lights without the xenon flash. The 2 xenon flash lighting arms are responsible for the final exposure. As we press the shutter button, they will flash and they will provide enough light to freeze the motion of the iris and fully light the iris as well. The LED lighting arms are not providing anything for our exposure, they're just there to contract the pupil. The LED light gives us a much more predictable, repeatable pupil size before we fire the flashes. Once the pupil is small and stable, the xenon flash fires faster than the eye can react, which means no blinking response or discomfort for the customer. Compared to the continuous lighting only method that we showed last time, this is a much more comfortable method for those with light sensitive eyes. It also provides much cleaner, better quality images in terms of settings and ISO. The capture process itself is really quick and simple. The first thing that you need to do is align your shot and find the iris in your viewfinder. You want this as large as possible without it coming off the edges of the screen. You also need to focus either manually or using the autofocus on your lens. You might need to offset your focusing point to make sure that it's focusing on the iris itself, not on the eyelashes, surrounds of the eye, and not in the black pupil in the very center, which is where your camera will naturally want to focus. Next, we activate the LED lights using the Adaptalux app. I've connected my iPad here to the control pod, and this is where I'm going to control all of my lights. This is going to be really handy for swapping the lights from one side to the other side. So the first thing that I'm going to do is turn on the LED light on this side. Make sure that boost mode is on using the toggle that is on the top right hand side, but if you're using the latest app, this will automatically turn on when we turn on our first flash arm. The LED lights do not need to be particularly bright. You can have it set as low as possible based on the contraction of the subject's pupil. Once it's on, give the subject a few seconds to allow the pupil to fully constrict and stabilize. While the eye stabilizes, we can turn on the first flash arm by selecting a flash arm via the app. I set it to level 5 because this is the brightest flash that we can get, and that will give us the best possible settings. Next, I'm going to focus once again, double check that everything is aligned, and hit the shutter button. The trigger just here will tell the flash arm to fire, and we will have our first shot of our iris. Immediately after that, we can turn off our LED lighting arm and turn off the flash lighting arm. We're going to swap to the other side and repeat that same process. I'm turning on this LED arm, and I'm going to make sure it's set to 50%, which is a nice round number, and then I'm going to turn on the second flash arm and make sure that it's set to level 5. As soon as the flash arm is charged, you can hit the shutter button once again, and you will capture the exact same image of the same iris, just lit from the other side. Don't move the camera, no adjustments between shots. It's important that these two photos match identically in every way other than the location of the reflection on the eye. So, exposure settings. We generally don't recommend specific exposure settings for your exact setup because there's too many variables like the lens, the camera you're using, the exact position of your lighting, but I will give you a typical starting point. So this shot of a nice fair blue eye was taken at f11 on the lens, which translates to f22 because of the 2x teleconverter on the lens there. It's a nice low ISO image, so we're at ISO 500 here, but you could easily push this down to ISO 100 if you wanted to. The shutter speed is 1/200th of a second. It needs to be under 1/200 just for the flash sync. Due to the power output of the flash, this should result in a much higher quality image than the same method using only LEDs. Because of the power of the flash, we're freezing any motion, we're getting an awful lot of light in a very small space of time. So now that we have two images of the same iris, we can talk about the post-processing workflow. Post-processing is where the method comes together, but it's intentionally simple so that it's easy and fast to repeat in a studio environment, and you can reduce your post-processing time. Firstly, both RAW files receive identical global adjustments: contrast, texture, clarity, noise reduction, and if you want to increase the resolution, you can use AI Super Resolution for better printing quality. From there, both of these files are brought into Photoshop as separate layers and then aligned on top of one another. Because the catch lights are on opposite sides in each image, we simply mask the reflection out from one layer using the data from the other. There's no cloning, there's no guesswork, and no AI, just clean, original detail. So after we've cleaned up the reflections, the iris is then isolated with a circular mask, placed on a black background, and lightly refined at the edge. Any additional artistic effects are optional, but the core image is already complete at this point, and we could print this at a full scale. You might also want to darken the center of the pupil just to make it match the outside surrounding black. AI has come a long way and it is still improving, but using the generative AI options in Photoshop to remove the reflections is replacing a large amount of someone's unique iris detail with a computer's guesswork. It's not a true iris photograph, and for the small amount of extra effort, it's worth it to just use this method instead. The remove tool and AI generative fill is a good backup option, and it can often give passable results, but it should be used very sparingly. This entire process can be done in just a matter of minutes. The shooting process in particular can only take a couple of minutes, providing everything goes smoothly, and then editing, once you've got everything dialed in, a few templates made, then you can do this again in just a few minutes. It's absolutely possible to turn these around within an hour, within a day, and have them printed and to the customer. So now that we know that xenon flash lighting arms work really well for iris photography, does that mean that the previous method with just the LED lighting arms is no longer valid? Well, no, that is still a very viable option, especially if you need to keep costs down, or if you're just trying this out casually, maybe on your family members. It's still a fantastic way to capture detailed photos of the iris. In fact, it's a little bit simpler in terms of its workflow, and you can see the results on the back of the camera before you press the shutter button. If, however, you're planning on running an iris photography business, introducing xenon flash into your lighting workflow can vastly improve the image quality and reduce any potential discomfort for those with sensitive eyes. Because of the previous method required the LEDs to be on full brightness, we found that people would often find watery eyes or simply can't open their eye wide enough to get a full image of the iris. This time, because we only need the LEDs to be on 50% brightness, it's much more comfortable for the customer. And because of the increased power of the flash and the better settings with that motion freezing capability of the very fast xenon flash, you can get fantastic image quality, which is much better for printing large iris portraits. So if you're doing some iris photography and you want the best possible results from your images, make sure to check out the links in the description for those iris photography packs, both the LED and the xenon flash versions. If after 2 iris photography tutorials you still have some questions, let me know down in the comment section and hit the like button if you learned something from today's video. Make sure to hit subscribe for lots more macro and iris photography tutorials, ideas, and inspiration coming in the future. But for now, that is all I've got time for. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.